So tonight we are talking about re-upping. And I wonder if some of you have ideas. When you heard the word re-upping your homeschool, what word associations did you have with that? How did you interpret what I meant when I said re-upping? Restart after a break, restart, renew, reorganizing, recommit, rekindling excitement, committing, leveling up, reinvigorating, getting back into the routine, refresh, re-energize, re. Are you noticing a theme here? There's a lot of re this, increasing motivation, new ideas, evolving. So first, I just want to draw your attention to that prefix re. Do you know what it indicates? It indicates that you have already done something. It's not even starting from scratch. It might be starting fresh, but not from scratch. Re-upping has within it the idea that you've actually had the skill, but you are re-energizing it. I love that word, re-energize, that you're going to add this idea to what already exists. You're not starting from scratch. You're not a blank slate. You've actually had some momentum or some success or even some experiments. Maybe you're not convinced yet that your homeschool is humming along at the level you want it to be, but you've at least tried. You've put your feet in the pool. You're taking some time to splash around in the water. So re-upping for me means that we are re-upping your energy for homeschooling, not just the practices, but we are going to inject some enthusiasm, some freshness, a feeling of competence as you face new challenges. What is the one thing nagging at you right now that you wish you had better control of, or you understood better, or that would, if you could fix it, wave a magic wand, what is that thing you would fix or wave the wand at? Consistency, patience, bring the sunshine back. Well, I got to let the sky do that. Let's see. Commit to routine, consistency, struggles with dysgraphia, the daughter's motivation, how to be less reactive with my child, finding a homeschool flow, consistency in writing, eliminating doubt, U.S. history in all caps. Oh my gosh. I think these really reflect the wide range of emotions that we all have when we are faced with the next semester, or if you live in the Southern Hemisphere, the brand new school year starting in February. We are all in a moment where we're reevaluating what we've done so far. We're taking stock, and then we're like, oh, if I could just be more consistent, or now that I know she has dysgraphia, what do I do next? Or gosh, college is around the corner. Is my junior actually ready to apply in the fall? Or maybe it's that feeling of just motivation. Everybody knows what to expect. They know what the routine is, but they just don't want to do it. They're just tired. How many of you feel a little bit tired and you're like, I shouldn't feel tired this early in the year? Anyone feel that? So imagine this. You came to the finish line of the fall or the end of your school year if you were in the Southern Hemisphere. And then suddenly, what is staring you in the face? Holidays that you're responsible for. And then the moment those are over, you have to clean up the holidays. It's not like they just go away. I still have lights I've got to take down, right? And then the second that's done, boom, you're back into the new semester. You're into the new year. Yeah, you're tired for a good reason. They're really, yeah, your tree is still up. My goodness, how many of you still have trees up, or a Hanukkah menorah, or Kwanzaa is just happening now, right? Like there are so many holidays. And some people celebrate into January, right? Even in the Christian holidays, there's, the Three Kings Day, Epiphany, all that stuff. So yeah, and some of you traveled through the nightmare of travel. So first of all, rest is really important. And so if you need a week to recover from the holidays where you actually do nothing, I say take it. I won't tell anyone. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little secret. There is a school district here in the Cincinnati area. Well, two districts actually with two different schools. There's an elementary school that had a gas leak And guess what? They're not back in session. They may be out for 2 whole weeks following the holiday break. They are not going to replace those days at the end of the school year. Those children are just going to miss 2 weeks of instruction. Then I talked to a friend of mine who is a Spanish teacher at a high school. They too had the rupture of some plumbing in one of their main teaching areas, and it flooded the entire first story of the high school. They are still not back in session, and it may take them 2 or 3 more weeks to fix this school so it's inhabitable. What that means is even schools adjust to snow days, evacuations because of flooding, gas leaks, teacher strikes. And what do? They just keep going. They don't beat themselves up. They say, gosh, we just didn't get to have those couple of weeks of school. Oh, well. So the reason I'm saying that to you, first of all, is in the homeschool, you have so much more flexibility. If you want to take an extra week and just lay around watching Lord of the Rings and eating popcorn and just enjoying each other without any pressure to make a gorgeous meal or unwrap gifts that you had to shop for, you have my complete endorsement. If you need an authority to tell you, I have no authority, but let's pretend I do. I am signing your permission slip. Get the rest you need. If you need to sleep in and you tell the kids, we're not starting homeschool until noon every day because I need a really slow morning. I want to listen to podcasts. I want to water my plants. I want to eat a really good breakfast. I want you guys to just play with toys and video games that we just bought you. And then each afternoon, we'll do something that sounds like homeschool, but we're going to do like a community vote. And we're just going to pick one thing a day, community vote. Should we do math today or should we do read aloud? Should we do poetry tea time or should we study grammar? Like, ease back in. Give yourself time to recover. It's too much to expect yourself to re-up when you are depleted of energy. Imagine, you're one of those electric cars and you've run out of battery. And what are you doing? You're frantically driving around looking for one of those stations to plug into. When you get to the station, plug in. And that's what I'm saying. Plug in. The station is here. It's your living room. It's your television. It's, taking walks. It's playing with the dog. Give yourself time to actually feel okay. And let me just tell you this. Schools don't make up that time, and they probably should, because they do not get to spend all day with those kids. They're rotating classroom to classroom, trying to cram them full of the information they need. You've got so much time. You can make up for math facts while you're giving your kid a bath, right? You can talk about grammar while you're driving to the dentist. Not everything needs to happen at a kitchen table in order for it to count. So ease back in and allow yourself to incorporate some of the learning into your regular life. And don't feel like the only sign of progress is official homeschooling at a kitchen table. How does that feel? What do you think? When we're doing nothing, my boys spend their days reading, doing origami, having amazing conversations, helping with cooking, going for walks, playing games, watching movies, AKA homeschool. I mean, I remember someone asking one of my kids what homeschooling was. This was, back when like my oldest child was probably 13 and my youngest was like 5 or whatever. And he started telling them, he's like, well, we watch movies and we do origami and my mom reads books and we have lots of tea and we eat lots of muffins. Like that was his description of homeschool. Person's like, but do you learn anything? Because it's just life. For them, homeschool is just life, right? It's just life. Awesome. Awesome. We weren't doing homeschooling today, but my 8-year-old picked up a book and read it to me for the first time without any reading instruction. Let me add this little feature. It's something that I think would really help you to think about this week off or these 5 days off or whatever you want to take in a healthy, schoolish way to relieve you of any adjacent guilt that you might be feeling. We need time for consolidation. The scientific research shows that learning goes in a cycle. It's not linear sequential. So we put information in and it needs time to find a home inside of the learner. Did you know that? It isn't just immediately acquired, valued, and useful to the child. They have to actually live with it for a little bit. So sometimes we're doing all this phonics instruction and we're like eagerly awaiting the moment when it all clicks. And then we give up because there are so many tears. And out of the blue, the kid comes downstairs and says, "Hey, I read a book." And you're like, "What?" Because there was room, there was space, there was the capacity to consolidate and integrate what was learned with no glaring eyes, needing the child to perform in order to validate us as somehow having achieved the goal of teacher. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does this make sense? So sometimes those breaks are actually academically needed. You know, in the academic world, we call it a sabbatical so that you can take a break from teaching and read and allow yourself to distill your thoughts before you feel pressure to publish again. Well, why wouldn't that be true for children? How are they different? They're not. They're built with the same brains, the same way of thinking. So give your kids a chance to consolidate. This is another reason rotating subjects is sometimes valuable. To know that you really don't have to do math on a certain day, that you're going to have a whole day not to do math, it's a psychological relief in the same way that you get a relief of knowing tomorrow I don't have to run or tomorrow I don't have to make dinner. It's not that you can't make dinner. It's that every now and then it's just such a relief to know you don't have to think about it, right? And that allows you to pull together the energy to face it again on another day. So when you look at your kids, they're human beings. They're not students. They're not machines. They're people like you. So if you're tired, you can bet they're probably tired in their own way. And rejuvenating you is going to rejuvenate them. All right. So believe it or not, we're still on the intro. So I'm going to dive into what I wanted to share that I thought would be really, hopefully, potentially valuable to you. So we're going to look at 3 ways to re-up your energy. The first way is we're going to look at how to introduce something new. We're going to look at, secondly, how to embrace something tried and true. And then we're going to look at something for you. Okay. So yeah, I am a poet and I barely know it. Something new, something tried and true, something for you. So let's talk about first the something new. Now, if you've read my book, it's, hiding over there very obviously for you to notice. If you've read The Brave Learner, you know how much I value surprise, mystery, risk, and adventure. The new year is the perfect time for all of those. This is the time to put your energy into a treasure hunt. The thing you read about in my book that you thought that'd be a great thing to do. Oh, but I can't because I got all these new textbooks and it's September and I want to break out the new curriculum. Okay, everybody's bored of the curriculum. We've all seen the cover. We know how thick the book is. We've used, the brand new pen that has all the ink in it. That's lost its luster. So now is the time to bring in some of those novel ideas that you discounted in the fall or that you discount at the beginning of your school time. Bring in something unexpected, a treasure hunt. That would mean getting little Post-it notes, writing clues, and it leads to something, maybe a new board game, maybe to a movie you'll watch together. Maybe it leads to a recipe that you're going to bake together. Maybe it's going to lead to tickets to go see a children's play somewhere. In other words, a little surprise, a little mystery, something that sort of awakens them to an opportunity or a new activity that they didn't see coming, right? Little mystery, a little risk. There are ways for you to implement new ideas that relate to curriculum. Sometimes what happens is we get married to a vision in our heads. Maybe it's the Charlotte Mason, wild and free, natural, crafty homeschool mama. And you feel ready to try something structured just for the fun of it. I remember Katrin was really enamored with these friends she met in her soccer team who had workbooks. And by the time Katrin came along, I didn't use workbooks. And she said, "Mom, I need a spelling book." I'm like, "You do?" And she's like, "Yeah, I want a spelling book." And I thought, well, I'm not going to waste good money on spelling books. I don't even believe in them. But what if I saw a spelling book as a toy? So we went to the supermarket and we shopped for spelling books at the supermarket. It cost me like $8. And then did I care if she finished it? I absolutely did not. But here's what was really interesting. Because it wasn't a requirement from me, because she picked it out herself, and because it was a contrast to this very unschooly, natural lifestyle of learning that I always embraced around her, she felt like she was doing something exciting and novel. So there's no skin in the game here. You do not have to prove to anyone that you're a purist of classical education or Charlotte Mason or even Brave Writer. Sometimes mixing up the styles of learning wakes up a child. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of workbooks. And you say, then let's play Yahtzee. We're going to work on math using dice. But if you've always been using dice for math and games for math, they might really relish, hey, I just have to do 5 problems on this worksheet and I'm done. That might feel like a relief after all this, playfulness. So flip the script on what's expected in either direction, in any direction, and you've achieved new. If, for instance, you're used to doing table work, try involving the body. If you've done a ton of field trips, try staying home for 2 or 3 weeks without going anywhere. By the way, I did that one time, and I could not believe how much better I felt about my homeschool. Like, I had thought that we were supposed to go all these places and take all these sports and do all these music lessons and join co-ops. And there was this one period where I was like, I'm done. We're going to not go to the dentist. We're not going to go shopping. We're just going to stay home. And those 3 weeks felt restful. And we all felt like we had accomplished something. And then we were ready to go back out in the world again. So sometimes it's just evaluating, is this a really busy season or is this a really boring season? And we need to get out to make it more interesting. If you usually work with one child at a time, consider working with the whole family on one lesson and don't worry about anyone's level. For instance, I had 5 kids. So when I was teaching, times tables to my 4th grader, and I had a son who was already doing algebra, it would seem silly, right, to do a times table lesson with my older son present. But guess what? When I got tired of working one-on-one, I just involved everybody. And you know what's interesting? The older kids are going to bring their superior knowledge to the table. And that actually shows the younger kids the value of what they're learning. And sometimes you can even ask the older kid, what was the trick you used when you were trying to master the 9s? And now they get to be the braggadocious older student who's already proven themselves to you and showing their younger siblings like the shortcut or the way. So if you've always worked one-on-one, grade level oriented, try some things as a group. Study history as a group, study science as a group. Those very much lend themselves to family learning. But if you're used to doing everything as a family, oh my gosh, please do some one-on-ones. And like I always say, when I make recommendations like this, you only have to do them once. I'm not asking you to set up a whole new pattern. I'm saying do a one-off and see what it creates, see what it releases, because you may discover something new that would be fun for you. So for a one-on-one, I remember with my son, Liam, he was really struggling with writing. He had dysgraphia, and I would try and do the same tips and tricks I used with all my kids. He'd get so distracted. All he wanted to do was look out the window at the bird feeder. He was obsessed with counting and watching birds. And one day it hit me. Oh, he just needs the windows to be dark. You know what? Kids in school do homework at night. Maybe he and I should be working on writing in the evenings when all the other kids can be attended to by their dad. And I just go in the living room away from the kitchen table where it's dark and we work on writing at night. Oh my God, he loved it. It felt so personal. It felt like he was being valued. And I literally did the very same thing with my daughter, Johanna, when she had to study US history to take the SAT 2 test, when she was applying for college. We did 6 weeks of history, and we did it in the evenings when all the other kids were being attended to by their dad. I share this with you because one-on-one time doesn't have to be out of the house, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. It just needs to be one-on-one. So think about getting up early or over lunch or in the evenings. Think about doing it on a weekend. Think about it maybe at the soccer practice where one kid is playing soccer and you sit with the other kid while that practice is happening and you have time with that child. I used to drop off one of my kids for math tutoring, and then Katrin and I would go to Panera. We'd have hot chocolate and we would work on writing. So these are ways that you can get those one-on-one times without it feeling like an extra cramp in your schedule. And again, you don't have to do it every week, and certainly not every child every week. These are like seasonings on whatever your habits are to keep it fresh, to re-up the energy. Okay, the second new thing that you can add in is elective energy. So here's a suggestion if you're brave enough to take it. Are you ready? Okay, let's pump up a little bit because this is going to take some courage. You ready? Okay. All right, I'm just going to trust that you are. In January, my challenge to you is to not do the subject no one likes for the whole month and swap in an elective. Oh my gosh. What if they don't like writing? I know. I guess this month they're not going to write. What if they don't like math? Oh no, maybe we're not doing math this month. You know what I'd like you to do? You can test the waters and just do a week, if it's just too scary. But what are things you could do that are electives instead? And you might just discover to your shock and amazement that it includes the very subject you think you're skipping. So, for instance, sculpting, modeling, and baking clay, making whole little cities or beads or earrings or jewelry out of that clay, thinking through how to build those crafts and taking the time to actually do it. Bird watching, we're already talking about. Project Feeder Watch is both math and writing and recording, and that is an amazing opportunity. You can do baking, well, I don't know what we call it, cooking at stovetop, to make one of those, oh my gosh, birders tell me what it's called, suet. Remember, I have, possible COVID brain from the past. I don't know, a little bit fuzzy brain, but suet, right? You can make suet from scratch. You can test attracting different birds to your feeders. You can build your own feeders. You can go in the wild and look for birds. You can trace birds on tracing paper and measure the birds and see what lengths they are, draw them to scale and compare them on the wall. Suddenly you're doing math, you're doing writing, you're doing handwriting, and yet it seems like you're taking those subjects off because you are so into birds. Do you understand what I'm saying? Coding. Fabulous idea. Perfect idea. In fact, my son Noah is already teaching Lavender about coding. She's 2.5. She turns 3 in a week, so almost 3. And he's already got board books that teach his children about coding. Yep. Another one, musical instruments. You can start playing them. You can learn the recorder. You could learn the harpsichord. Or conversely, you could just make music the immersive experience of January. You could go to the symphony, a bluegrass bar to hear fiddlers. You could go and listen to a children's musical event. Those exist in Cincinnati. Perhaps you have them. We got into opera one year. Not kidding. We watched so many operas by video. And then there was this one on television for little women, and they used a scale that had like 11 or 12 notes in it instead of the usual scale. And it was just bizarre. And we literally sat through the whole thing because we had already watched so much opera. We had developed a tolerance for it. You could be doing so much with music, not only playing, but listening, and musical theater would be awesome. There is in Dayton, I live in Ohio. I live between Cincinnati and Dayton. And in Dayton, they used to have this musical theater program for children that performed a different, like, fairy tale each month. And it was for schools, and homeschoolers caught wind of it, and we all started going. So look into your area wherever you live and see if that kind of thing exists. But you could just start learning about music itself. And if your kids are playing music, this is a great month to just really go all in. Another one, nature exploration. Now, I realize that it is cold where we are, and it's super warm and sunny in Australia. So maybe the Australians are going to enjoy this advice more than those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere, north like I do. However, some of our best nature exploration happened in the cold weather because we were stir crazy in the house. So we would walk in the snow. We would go look at the frozen creek that runs along our property. And we would hike through the snow, which felt very adventurous with our dog until we could get to the big open field. And then we would, make snowmen or throw snowballs and then come home and have hot chocolate. And then we would use our Charlotte Mason nature study way of approaching it. We'd bring home a pine cone or we'd bring home something that we discovered, a rock, a twig, a bunch of branches, and we would draw it to the best of our ability. That is what nature exploration is. But guess what? Nature exploration also shows up in things like skiing, hiking, ice skating, swimming, frisbee golf. So if you have kids who think nature hiking or just nature walks are dull, do frisbee golf. They will be interested. And it's the same ding dang thing. Join a ski community and go skiing. Give your kids an outdoor life for a month. What about handicrafts? Art. What do I have here? Knitting, finger knitting in a spool, crochet, collage, those little looms where you weave potholders. I still have all my kids' potholders. Drawing, painting, tending to indoor plants, growing plants from seed. These are all things you could be doing right now. What if you have pets? Could you train your pet rats to run in a maze? We did that. Could you train the dog? Could you learn pet care for a hamster or a bunny rabbit? These are all things you could just attack together. Maybe you get into having an iguana or tarantulas. I'm not recommending those, but hey, I had rats and ferrets and a bunny and a dog. Yes, please give me the medal because I'm not a pet person. And yet that's what we did. Another thing that is actually so wonderful that we often forget about is acting. Improvisation and acting games are so powerful. I used to check out these books from the library, and I actually bought a few that are just improvisation games to play with kids. Guess what it builds? It builds self-confidence, speaking ability, thinking on your feet. The yes and dynamic of improv teaches you how to cooperate. It also involves you in storytelling and taking on characterization and emotion. Like there is so much benefit from acting and nobody does it with their kids. I used to teach the theater classes at our co-op. We did improv, readers theater, Shakespeare, one-act plays, fairy tale reenactments. All of this helps kids learn and it doesn't feel like school. So I strongly recommend that. What are those books? I'm old, so my books are all going to be from the 80s and 90s. I just say, go to Amazon and look up improvisation for children, acting with children, theater games for children. Put those into your search engine at the library and things will come up. And then just try them. Maybe they have you, like, I remember one of the activities was memorize a tongue twister and then say it in as many characterizations as you can. So Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, right? But say it like Darth Vader. Now say it like Frodo. Now say it like, and fill in the blank, right? So this is the kind of thing that you can do with your kids that doesn't feel like school, but is going to accomplish all of your education goals. And then finally, board, card, and video games galore. Just dive into those in January. Have a board game, video game extravaganza and really enjoy doing that with your kids. Okay, what other new things can you do besides all these amazing ideas? Oh, they do not end here, sweet friends. Ready for another brave one? Okay, let's muscle up. Get brave. Okay, ready? Tell your kids to rearrange all the furniture in your main family room. that they're in charge and they can put anything anywhere they want. Oh, I know you're dying. You're like, the sectional? How are they going to move the sectional? I don't know. That is for them to solve. Right? This is not you doing it for them. This is you telling them, hey, maybe lay out a new design, talk to dad. What do we need to move a couch? If we rearrange all the books in the bookshelves, what's the new arrangement? If we want a totally different set of chairs in here than are currently here, where are we getting them from? The reason for this is that there is something about changing the dynamic expectations of a space that catalyzes learning. Suddenly there's a new nook to read the book in. You're like, ooh, that chair now seems really cozy. I got to think of something to do so I can sit in that really cozy chair. Ooh, the couch is oriented now towards the window and I'm looking out the window and now I think I want to grow a tree out that window. Like it changes the way your brain engages because the environment is challenging you to think differently. And when you give your kids some of that autonomy, like what can they hang on the walls? How would they make something cozy? Where would they like to put the books that they can find for themselves? When you give them some of that control, they become more invested in participating in using it. If you keep creating the magic for them, it becomes wallpaper. They stop seeing it. They rely on you, but they don't really find it exciting. So if you're brave, try that. Another one, this one comes from a friend of mine and it blew my freaking mind. When she did her read aloud time with her children, they always lit fires in the winter and had s'mores in the living room. I'm so sorry I told you that. I hope your kids aren't listening. I have to be honest. I never did it because I had carpet. She had floors. So that might have made a difference. But her kids told my kids about it and they nagged me about it forever. So I thought I would just ruin your life and tell you that exists. And then you can decide how brave you are. Okay, another one. Put your kids in charge of poetry tea time and tell them to invite you when it's ready. And here's what I want you to do while they're getting it ready. Now, I'm assuming, of course, you don't have babies and toddlers who could, harm themselves. So if you have babies and toddlers, you'll need to be taking care of those while the age appropriate children prepare it for you. But if you don't have babies and toddlers, I want you to go take a bath. Get out of their way. Do not witness what they're doing. Leave them in charge. If you don't want them baking, give them the resources to provide snacks that don't need to be baked. Okay. But it's their job to pick the books, decorate the table, set it up the way they want it, select what you're going to eat and drink, and they invite you when it's ready. Okay. 3 more of these brand new ideas. This one is not new, but I want to remind you. Hello, this is the month. You can do a book club party from the Dart, Arrow, Boomerang, or Slingshot. Okay. So if you're one of those moms who does all the front matter of those products and never gets around to the book club party, skip the front matter and just do the book club party. Just do the party and enjoy. Give yourself a break. You can always get to, vivacious verbs another month, but this month, have the party. And then 2 more things. Historical dress-up days. Have you ever done that? Where you're like, okay, it's the colonial times. And we did this. It's colonial times. We are going to make candles, and then we are going to live by candlelight for an evening. And we're going to put our hairs in buns, and we're going to knit. And we're going to play cards because that's the only entertainment available. And if somebody misbehaves, we're going to put them in stocks. And we literally created stocks for our kids. And so then, of course, they wanted to misbehave so they could each take a turn having their arms through the stocks and their head through the stocks, right? We followed history at the time. We used sunlight. So that was a lot of our history rotation. And when we did the colonial period, that's what we were using. Later, I followed the well-trained mind history cycle. And there were plenty of times where we just picked a history topic because we were interested. When Catherine was born, we got into World War II. It was completely out of cycle. And we did that for 3 months just because we got into it. We started watching old World War II movies on TV while I was recovering from childbirth. And it got us really deeply into World War II. So kind of a mixture of all of those. For high school, Yeah, high school is a whole different animal, but I would say this for high school, you can still do it topically because part of what I think about history is this, and I have a degree in history, so I love history. Everything is history. Everything. You can do the history of fashion, the history of music, the history of technology, the history of women, the history of plants, right? Like there is a way to examine the history of anything. And when you pick that thing, it touches all the other aspects of what it means to study history. And believe me, they're all going to take history classes in college that will do that deep dive, more comprehensive look. So don't worry about it too much. I mean, let me ask you a frank question about history. How many of you remember anything about history until you started teaching it to your kids? Raise your hand if you suddenly thought, gosh, did I ever learn history? When you're 35 and 40 and you're suddenly reading it to your kids, you're like, I don't remember this. And the reason is when you're under 20, you have not lived long enough to fully appreciate the scope and span of time. You don't have enough geographical and sort of linear sequential experience to make sense of what happened before you were alive. So it's sort of like your Teflon, it bounces off of you. But as you get older, it starts to integrate. So with your kids, you're making them aware of history, you're acquainting them with it, but they're not going to master it unless they pick a topic and they deep dive it because of their own fascination level. Yeah. And the last thing, of course, is you can act out historical events, right? So corn pone in the cast iron skillet, whittling wood, tracking animals. These are all, playing games that were historically accurate to the time. American Girl does an amazing job with a lot of that. And we relied heavily on their sort of activity kits to give us ideas for things that we could do to make history come to life. So remember, we said something new. Now we're at something tried and true. And this one's very short. Mostly what I want to say here is if something's working, you don't have to fix it. So if you really love a certain program and everybody around you is saying, oh, but there's a better one over here, do not take the bait. Stick with what works. Occasionally, you might want to try a new practice with the thing that works to keep it interesting. Light a candle, open the book to the middle and skip a few chapters and see if you can do this math problem without having done the 3 chapters preceding it. Maybe you can combine 2 subjects and do a little cross-curricular instruction together. For instance, while you're doing math from a program you love, maybe you would do a deep dive into math vocabulary. What are the nouns associated with this lesson? What are the verbs? Talk about how math vocabulary has evolved. For instance, mathematical notation, very similar to punctuation in writing. These are symbols and they give us instructions. What's similar about them? What's different about them? That's the kind of engagement you can do with a tried and true mechanism. So if you've already got something working for you, just layer it with a little cross-curricular conversation and start to show how it integrates with what else they're learning. This works really well with nature and science or literature and vocabulary, or thinking about how the language, like for instance, if you took a nature walk, find the item, measure it, describe it orally. You might notice color, shapes, sizes, comparing it to similar items. Then you might draw that item. Then you might do some copy work of its Latin name. Then you might look at the Latin and see if it's related at all to its English terminology. Maybe you're going to write a verse of poetry, including the Latin name and the regular English word, right? So as you are playing with things that work, just build on them. Don't overturn them. Don't transform them into misery. Take advantage of them being tried and true, and then layer some of these other experiences on top. And then finally, something for you. So we've had something new, something tried and true, something for you. The driver of all homeschools is your curiosity, not your children's. Now, I know you're going to follow your children's curiosity because that's the good kind of parents you are. And your children's curiosity is essential for their learning. But what drives the homeschool is your curiosity because you're in charge. So whether you're curious about requirements or curriculum or an actual field of study will determine what your homeschool feels like. So if you're only curious about requirements, the energy your children will pick up about homeschool is that there are a lot of requirements and we really got to get through them. And mom is really worried about requirements. And that will be the characteristic of your homeschool. If you're the kind of person who cares a lot about curriculum, you get a lot of joy out of researching and studying and thinking and trying new stuff, your kids are going to think homeschool is all about the textbooks, the workbooks, the new ideas that you're getting from a textbook and a workbook. They're going to think the learning lives inside the curricula because you're giving it so much attention and so much of your curiosity and joy. But what if your curiosity was around the Native Americans in California? What if your curiosity were around Jane Austen novels? What if your curiosity was around the civil rights history of the United States? These all three were curiosities of mine, and they became some of our most successful units of study, not because I assigned them to my children, but because I was interested in them in the middle of the day when they were around. I didn't do homeschool. I put on Jane Austen movies. I wasn't doing homeschool. I was reading about the Native Americans of Southern California, which eventually propelled me to studying. I actually have the map on the wall that I drew back then of what North America looked like if it wasn't based on states, but it was based on Native American nations. Isn't that interesting? Because I wanted to understand that. And that hung on our wall for 5 years because I was interested in it. And then when we would start studying history of the United States, we were referencing it against that map long before it was a thing. And I realized that's what drove our homeschool because I became fascinated with learning, with the actual material that was part of an education. I will credit my love of Charlotte Mason with giving me sort of a template for how to do that. So she was all about short lessons, nature exploration, the arts, taking stock of history where you live, right? She was all about British history. I don't live in Britain. So I was about American to start, to really understand who I am, where I'm from, who else is from here, what else happened besides what I think I know, right? And immersing myself that way as a grown-up paid dividends for my children. So re-upping happens when you dedicate time to your interests in the middle of the day with your children just hanging out, just they're hanging around. You don't have to assign it to them. They're just hanging around. They just happen to see you watching Colin Firth play Darcy and watch him dive into the pond, right? They just happen to see you paging through art books and putting on Sister Wendy videos. And then they start to get interested because, well, if mom, the cool adult in their life, thinks this is what adults do in their free time, they're more likely to think that's the cool thing to do in theirs. They're not going to do it because you assign it. They're going to do it because that's what cool people do. So here are the final bits that I want to tell you, because this is also for you. While you are allowing yourself to follow your curiosity, and I love that somebody brought up animal husbandry and permaculture. I should have mentioned, I just happen to be literature arts kind of person. I think that's very clear to you. I had this friend, her name was Julie also. She was a homeschooler at the same time as me, and we used to email each other. And she said, I'm so jealous of you. Your kids love Shakespeare. Your kids are acting and they love Jane Austen and they read big, thick books on their own and they think history is interesting. And she's like, I don't know how to get my kids to do that. And my jaw dropped. Do you want to know why? Because her kids did things my kids would never do. One of them found her father's old Mother Jones magazines from the 70s. And she learned how to build, I'm trying to think of what they're called. They're self-sustaining habitats or domiciles out of earth in the backyard. She was learning how to build places you could live in her backyard using nothing but what was natural in the backyard. And eventually she got a job with Habitat for Humanity. Like that became her career path. The other daughter was crossbreeding fish in their local creek to come up with new breeds of fish. I'm like, and you're jealous that my kids read Shakespeare? Anyone can read a book. Who the heck crossbreeds fish? Here's my point. Your interests have a lot to do with who your kids become. So lean into them. You're passing down your expertise. That's part of the benefit of being in a family. And giving yourself to those interests allows your kids to see them as valuable, because if an adult still values it, it must be important. Not, well, it's valuable when you're in 4th grade because you got to get to 5th grade. And I've never thought about it since. That's less interesting to a child. Makes sense, right? So here's the last thing I want to say. The person doing all this magic, the person who just made amazing holidays happen, who loves homeschooling, but sometimes gets tired from it, needs to be fit. Here are your instructions from me. Eat well, exercise, sleep, research, read, take notes, make a plan, execute the plan, reflect on the experience, adapt. Those are your marching orders. You will not do all of those every day, every week. But if you return to them, they will help you re-up on any day. So if you've been going through a period where you're exhausted and you're not eating well and you haven't taken a walk in 3 weeks, just focus on eating well, exercise, and sleep. If those are going well and you are sitting there with 50 pages of PDF files you haven't downloaded in your inbox, go download them and read. Just read, read the information. Just read. You don't have to do anything. Just read. And then you might take some notes on what you read. And then if you have a little more energy, scribble up, get out one of your little notepads, scribble down a potential plan. Something to try. See how it goes. Execute it, do it, see if it works. Don't leave it on the pad. Actually try it. And then over a cup of tea, reflect on it. What worked? What didn't? Is it worth doing a second time? Was one time plenty? And then adapt. Try something else. Does that make sense? Just keep it simple. Homeschooling is so simple. We want it to be so much harder than it is. Follow the thread of curiosity. Be so thrilled when you finally find yourself immersed in something, and don't worry about the stuff you're not immersed in, because guess what's going to happen? You're not always going to be immersed in that stuff. It's going to go away. That will run out. And when it runs out, it'll be time for that next thing to move in. And each thing that you do is adjacent to every subject. That is one of the main theses of my book, The Brave Learner. So if you haven't read it yet, go read it, because that will help you actually understand the underlying theory here. All right. Yeah. Eating well, exercising, and sleeping, the 3 hardest. That's why they're at the top of the list. And let me just tell you, I was either pregnant or breastfeeding for 12 years. Sisters, I know. I had bedwetters. Sisters, I know. It's really hard. You know what I wish I had done? Here's what I wish I'd done. I wish I just told my husband, once a month, I'm not sleeping at home. I'm taking the baby and we're going to a hotel. My son has done that for his wife. It's like, when you need to, go stay overnight at a hotel. If there's a baby, take the baby. If there's no baby, don't take the baby. Just go get a night where you get to sleep. He figured out that if he travels for work, that's when he gets to make up his sleep. But we don't travel for work. So go get some ding-dang sleep. Stay at your mother's house if you have to and can't afford it to be in a hotel, but do get some sleep. I'm so glad this was a great webinar. Thank you all for coming live. I always enjoy our times together. Have a fabulous January, and I hope many of you are going to use next week to rest. Love you all.